Ruby Alvarez always had a plan in life. Her notebook, covered with a floral fabric that she had sewn herself, was her inseparable companion. In it, she wrote everything: monthly goals, necessary purchases, savings for the next trip, and even a list of qualities she looked for in a partner. Methodical, she liked to get up at 6:15 a.m. every day, even on Sundays. "The body doesn't understand weekends," she would say to those who questioned her. At 30 years old, she worked as a head librarian, a position she achieved through pure competence and organization. Her brown hair was always tied in a low bun, her clothes always ironed the night before, her shoes always clean. And perhaps that is why, when Owen Hayes appeared in her life, it was such a big surprise. Owen was the opposite. At 32 years old, he laughed loudly, told jokes, and was one of those people who seem to bring contagious energy when they enter a room. His curly hair, always a bit untidy, matched his casual way of dressing. They met in an absolutely ordinary situation, waiting in line at the market at the end of the year. Ruby was holding 2 bottles of wine and checking the list on her cell phone. Owen, behind her, was carrying a loaf of bread, cheese, and a box of cereal. "I think you're doing it wrong," he commented, pointing to her list. Ruby raised her eyebrows, surprised by the intrusion. "What do you mean? If you buy everything on the list, you never have the joy of discovering what you forgot. Half the fun of shopping is going back to the store the next day," he explained with a smile at the corner of his mouth. She rolled her eyes but ended up letting out a discreet smile. When the checkout system crashed, causing a collective wave of complaints, they looked at each other and laughed together, as if they shared a secret. It wasn't love at first sight. It was curiosity. They exchanged phone numbers, and from curiosity, a genuine desire to keep talking was born. They started slowly. A coffee on a Wednesday, a street fair the following Saturday. He liked to joke about everything. She liked to laugh, but only at the good ones. "You're hard to impress," he complained after a joke that hadn't even elicited a smile from her. "And you're good at trying," she replied, looking at him with a tenderness she had never felt before. After 6 months, when Owen kissed her for the first time at her apartment door, Ruby felt something different. It wasn't just attraction. It was as if, somehow, he was a missing piece in the puzzle of her life. A piece she didn't even know she was looking for. They had been together for almost 2 years. They didn't live together, but spent almost every weekend in the same apartment. They shared groceries, series, existential crises. They had a light-hearted yet deep relationship. When she missed the bus and cried out of frustration, he would pick her up just to say, "It's a good thing you missed it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have seen each other today." And she, who had a methodical temperament, learned from him that sometimes it's okay to leave clothes on the chair for 3 days. Owen worked as an administrative assistant in a commercial building downtown. The company, H+S Consulting, was on the rise, according to him. He spoke enthusiastically about the projects, colleagues, and the demanding yet fair boss. "How was your day?" Ruby would ask every night. "The usual. Meetings, phone calls, some boring reports," he replied, always with a tired but satisfied smile. Ruby woke up on a Tuesday that seemed ordinary, yet felt something different in the air. The sun was peeking through the gaps in the curtains. It was a perfect day to do something special. She picked up the phone and looked at the calendar. Nothing special marked, but still, she felt an urge inside her, a desire to do something she had never done before. She glanced at the clock. 8:17 a.m. Owen must have been at work for half an hour by now. She had the day off, a rarity in her routine. Lying there staring at the ceiling, an idea came to her that made her smile. Ruby was never the impulsive type, but that morning she woke up with an uncontrollable urge to surprise him. She got up energetically, took a quick shower, and headed to the kitchen. She decided to prepare his favorite lunch, eggplant lasagna with homemade tomato sauce, a recipe she had learned from her mother and knew he loved. Throughout the entire morning, she dedicated herself to preparing everything perfectly. The kitchen, usually immaculate, was now filled with pots, ingredients, and the comforting smell of homemade food. With everything ready, Ruby placed the lasagna in an insulated bag, along with a bottle of natural juice and 2 pieces of apple pie she had made over the weekend. She put on a blue blouse that Owen always complimented, applied a discreet lipstick, and left home with a light heart, anticipating the surprise in his eyes. She took the subway, and sitting while watching the stations pass by, felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had never been to his workplace before. She got off 2 stations before the stop where the building was located, preferring to walk a bit under the mild sun of that spring afternoon. The commercial building rose imposingly. Ruby entered the lobby, the insulated bag in one hand, a small bouquet of daisies in the other, bought from a street vendor along the way. "Good morning. I came to visit Owen Hayes from H+S Consulting," she said to the receptionist with a broad smile. The woman behind the counter, around 50 years old with rectangular glasses and grey hair in a bob cut, frowned. "H+S Consulting. It's on the 14th floor. But I don't know any Owen Hayes." Ruby felt a chill in her stomach. "He's been working there for more than 3 years. He is an administrative assistant." The receptionist typed something on her computer, looked at the screen for a few seconds and raised her eyes to Ruby. "There's no Owen Hayes in our system. Are you sure it's in this building?" Ruby nodded, feeling her throat dry. "I can call the company's HR for you to confirm," offered the receptionist, noticing Ruby's discomfort. "Please." The receptionist made the call, exchanged a few words in a low voice, and hung up the phone. "I'm sorry, but they confirmed that there is no Owen Hayes working at H+S Consulting at the moment." Confused and with her heart in her stomach, Ruby thanked and went out to the building's hall. The daisies, which had seemed so cheerful before, now hung sadly in her hand. She pulled her phone from her pocket and, with trembling fingers, called Owen. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Hi, Ruby. Everything okay?" "I'm here at the H+S Consulting building. Look, I brought your lunch," she said, her voice almost a whisper. On the other side, silence. And then, "Ruby, can you meet me at the cafe on the corner?" 20 minutes later, sitting at a table in a small and cosy cafe, Ruby watched Owen through the window. He was approaching, walking slowly, as if each step was painful. When he entered the establishment, his eyes met hers immediately. Owen was pale, the face of someone who had been caught in the middle of a lie hard to sustain. "I don't work there anymore, Ruby. I was fired," he said, sitting down in front of her. "But when?" she asked, her voice trembling. 6 months ago." The thermal bag with the lunch she had prepared with such care was between them on the table, like a tangible symbol of broken trust. Owen told everything at once without embellishments, knowing that it was the right moment to say it all. That he left the house every day pretending to go to work. That he spent his days in public libraries and cafes with Wi-Fi, sending out resumes, applying for anything. That he did odd jobs as a delivery driver to avoid having nothing. That deep down, he was trying to get back into the job market, but with less and less hope. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ruby asked, feeling her emotions mix like paint in a glass of water. "I was ashamed, Ruby. Ashamed to say that I failed. To admit that I'm not the successful guy you deserve." Ruby was listening, processing every word, and she was very upset to hear all of it. Not because he was unemployed, it was because he hadn't trusted her. She took a deep breath, tried to understand, but couldn't ignore the pain of the broken trust. I think I need some time. I need to think." "Ruby, I'm sorry. I was scared." And then he opened up like he never had before. He shared that he came from a family that always valued a good image, where failure was not an option, that all his cousins were successful, suited up, with important positions, and that he, Owen, never really knew what he wanted to be. But he tried, even when everything inside him screamed that he was insufficient. "When I met you, I fell in love in a way I had never felt before. But then came the fear of not being who you deserved. I felt like a failure, Ruby. And lying was a way to try to keep you by my side. I swore to myself I would be better for you. The conversation was long, painful, liberating. As Owen spoke, Ruby began to realize something. That man in front of her, with teary eyes and a choked voice, was not just the man who had lied to her. He was also the man who, when she missed an important deadline at work, made a point of reminding her of all the times she succeeded. He was the man who knew her favorite song and played it on bad days without her needing to ask. "You know what hurts me the most?" she finally asked. "It's not the fact that you're unemployed. It's knowing that you didn't trust me enough to share it, that you thought I would love you less because of it." Owen lowered his eyes, guilt evident in every line of his face. "I don't like what you do. I like who you are," Ruby said, feeling the words come straight from her heart. It was the phrase that changed everything. That afternoon she showed a rare strength of character, the kind you don't see often. In a time when relationships are often based on what a person has, rather than who a person is, she chose to look beyond. But she was also clear. "I will only stay if it's genuine. One lie can become 2, then 3. And then there's no turning back." He understood. And they decided to start over. In the following weeks, they adjusted their routine, organized their finances, and sat together to review his resume. Ruby helped him prepare for interviews, repeating common questions, giving feedback on his responses. "You don't need to be perfect, Owen. You just need to be yourself," she would say, holding his hands before each interview. Gradually, he started to believe in himself again. He realized he didn't need to carry the weight of his family's expectations, nor constantly compare himself to others. He just needed someone to be by his side without demands, someone who saw his worth beyond his salary or professional position. 3 months after that fateful Tuesday, Owen got a new job. It wasn't the dream position, nor a great salary, but it was honest. It was real and had new growth prospects. The night he received the news, they celebrated with a bottle of cheap wine and a pizza. Sitting on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by cushions, they laughed like they hadn't in a long time. "Do you know what I learned from all of this?" he asked, looking at her with an almost palpable intensity. "What?" "That sometimes, what we fear sharing the most is exactly what frees us when revealed." Ruby smiled, reaching out to touch his face. The trust, which had been shaken, was now being rebuilt, stronger and deeper. And most importantly, he was no longer alone. The lie almost tore them apart. But the truth saved them. Ruby learned that, even with all her planning and organization, life had unpredictable ways of unfolding. Owen learned that vulnerability wasn't weakness. Even in tough times, it was the only true path. That night, as Ruby fell asleep in his arms, she thought about the thermal bag that months ago she had taken to the building where Owen never worked. The bag they now used to carry snacks on weekends in the park. A physical reminder that sometimes it is in the detours from the planned path that we find the most valuable lessons and the deepest connections. Sometimes relationships go through trials, and it's up to each person to handle them in the best and most genuine way possible. For Ruby and Owen, the choice was clear. They chose truth. They chose to grow together. They chose to see beyond appearances and expectations. They chose love, not as a perfect fantasy, but as a real journey, with highs and lows, with challenges and lessons. And in the end, that was all that really mattered. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.